Hey there, it's Val. Welcome to my bullet journal set up for August 2024. For August, my theme is Greek mythology. And with this one, I've tried to keep it very subtle. I've not went in very heavy with Greek mythology references, but for the cover page, you will see that I've added a swan to symbolize the swan of Leda, and I've added a seagull to symbolise the goddess Leucothea, who's usually associated with seabirds and seagulls. Another Greek mythology reference that I could think of associated with the bird was Aethicus, the son of the king Priam of Troy, who was transformed into a seabird after he was grieving the death of his lover, the daughter of the river Sebron. And it is not mentioned which particular seabird he was transformed into, but because I already had a loose idea of using a seagull in my setup, I decided to go with it, as seabirds are loosely associated with a bunch of different Greek mythology stories. Behind the two birds on the cover page, I also added a Greek pillar to tie everything together. And for the quote page, I did not pick a quote from Greek mythology because I could not think of one. There was really not anything that appealed to me. Instead, I picked a quote by the Greek philosopher Epictetus, and the quote is, "Make the best use of what is in your power and let the rest happen as it is." I also stuck a bunch of different washi tapes and collage papers, and I chose to do most of the lettering and the cover page art using watercolour. For the colour scheme, I chose a mixture of greens, browns and goldens. I've also occasionally added a little red, and most of the red is actually in the washi tapes I've used throughout the spread. So you can see I've used this one particular thick one which had like a lot of red flowers with golden outlines, and I felt it really encapsulated the sort of aesthetic I was going in for the spread. Another prominent colour in this spread is grey, which you can see me using a lot of in the cover page, particularly because the two birds I included on the page are white with a shade of grey. And I have also added a window behind the two birds. I also printed a few Greek vases and pillars and just a few objects that sort of reflected the aesthetic I was going in for, and I printed one sheet on transparent or tracing paper and the other one on normal paper. So the transparent paper tends to very easily integrate itself into any sort of layouts I create, which makes it a very fun medium to work with. I've also used decoupage papers in the past, which were made from a similar kind of material, and I found them very fun to work with. So I think this is a technique I'll surely be implementing into my future setups. And then I finish off the lettering, adding a few final touches with markers and fine liners. And I've also written the word power in a sort of Greek font, and the same goes for the word happens. I've also then decided to add a darker green for the lettering, and then I added a few creepy wines on the cover page with the same sort of green to add a bit of colour on the cover page as well, because right now most of it was grey and brown and full of neutrals and was not exactly capturing the vibe I wanted to go for. And lastly, I tie up the cover pages by using some more scrapbook paper and some more golden washi tape to add to the opulence of the page. I also redid the lettering for the cover page, the word August on top of the scraps I stuck, and then added a bunch of shadows to add to the depth of the page. I also felt that the window was not exactly shining through the setup, like it was not the most cohesive element on the page, so I added a bit of black background. In my head, the black background also sort of signifies the Swan of Leda. It goes well with the whole story and the darkness associated with it. The setup still didn't look quite tied together to me, so I added a few highlights using a golden pen, and I also outlined the birds on the cover page using the same golden pen, and also coloured in the beak of the seagull with the same colour. I also felt like the seagull needed darker feathers, especially on the wings, so here I'm just mixing up a grey to add more depth to the feathers of the seagull and to darken them a little. That way they also contrast the brightness of the swan. I also go on to add some shadows to the lettering on the right. We can also never have too much washi tape in a setup, especially when we are trying to go for a vintage vibe. So I added some more of this floral vintagey tape I found which matched the colour scheme of my setup, and tied everything together with that. Added a few final details using the art liner and added some more golden washi tape to sort of create a border. The next two spreads I'm working on here are my gratitude tracker and my mood tracker. So you can already see the sketch for my mood tracker, and what I've tried to do here is I created the head of Medusa, and I've tried to draw 31 snakes there to represent 31 days of the month, and I'll be using those snakes as the mood trackers for this setup. I got inspired for this idea from a spread I saw on Pinterest, which I'll link below. For this spread too, I've tried to use most of the elements I used on the cover pages. I've also used this scrapbooking paper with a lot of bees on it, and on the mood tracker as well you can see I've used a tag with bees. So the bees in this setup are another subtle Greek mythology element I've tried to incorporate, and the bee in this case symbolises Metis. And if you're not familiar with the legend of Metis, it is said that Metis was Zeus's wife, and she was a shapeshifter goddess. The next spreads I'm going to set up here are my brain dump and self-care bingo. So I'm using the usual scrapbooky theme going on here. I've added a few bees to the setup as well. I've used a few pages from vintage books, and I cut this small little piece saying "you are loved" from one of the vintage scrapbooky materials I had. I thought it would be a good fit for the self-care bingo. For the brain dump, I'm going all out with the collage. Earlier I was slightly concerned about the amount of actual space I have to write things onto the brain dump onto the brain dump spread, and the future voiceover me can vouch for this. I've been using the brain dump spread and I've had plenty of space to write, so I've been able to write on top of the vintage paper that I stuck. I actually really like to write on scrapbooky paper that I stick onto these layouts, so which is why I've been doing it all this while, really. And for self-capping it, I cut out a grid paper in a square so I could create the bingo grid on it. And then I divide it into 25 squares, 5 by 5. And then I already had outlined a list of 25 activities that I wanted to include into this bingo. So this is going to be my go-to list to de-stress, and I'm just going to try to open this list whenever I feel like I need to de-stress. I'm going to pick one of these things and do them right away, because we've got 25 different things. It gives me a whole range of activities to do. It also means that I can do one activity almost every day, just in case, because I know that I might need to de-stress like literally almost every day, so this should come in very handy for me. The last one of these monthly spreads I have here is my August reflection page. I've not done a reflection page for any other days, for any other month of the year, because I was doing these last year and I realised I was not using them a lot. And this reflections page, however, is a little different from what I was doing earlier. So I've merged the monthly goals page with the monthly reflections page, and I've made categories for goals I want to achieve this month and a small section for any goals I would want to achieve next month, so I can have them all in one place if I think of anything. I've also included tiny sections to record any books I read or any new stuff I've been watching, and then at the bottom I have an actual reflection section. I've painted over the text with the same grey watercolour I was using for the birds on the cover page, and in some of the spare pages I have done a little more scrapbooking using the same washi tapes and sort of scrapbooking papers that I've been using the entire setup. And I'm just adding a few more stickers, and then I'm adding a few shadows on the green text with a red marker, and then a few sparkles to tie everything together. Also going over the text one more time, because layering watercolour on top of it really makes it a little faded. Next I'm moving on to the weeklies, and for the weeklies I have cut 4 different pieces of grid paper for the 4 different weeks, and I'll be using the grid paper for my weeklies, like my rolling weekly setup. So for all of my weeklies, as usual, I have one page for writing in all my weekly goals, and I don't assign them to any particular day because I can be quite spontaneous when it comes to my workflow. So I find it helpful to just write all the tasks in one place, roughly assign target days to them on the left, and then I can tick them off on the day I do them. For the grid setup of this weekly, which is on the right, I divide my page into 8, 7 of which will be the days of the week and 1 will be my creative little corner. And these are to write any specific events that will be day specific, and I can also use the tiny sections to write any specific things that happen in a day that I just want to note down. And to divide this page, I've tried to create little creepers, the same ones I used for the pillar on the cover page. The last 2 of my weekly setups have been very lazy, so I've just been collaging, and for the days of the week I've been using stickers that roughly match the colour scheme I've been going for. Then I've divided the page into sections using a golden marker, the same one I've been using to add highlights on all the pages, and just collaging my way through the corners, writing the number of the week and everything. Also, I thought one of the papers that I was using for the setup was a little too bluey, a little too cool for my taste, so I ended up adding a layer of watercolour on top of it to make the green match with the shade we've been using for the rest of the setup. just a few doodles at the top. Just tried to drop a bunch of pomegranates to symbolize Persephone. And here's the final flip through. I hope you enjoyed watching and that you gained some inspiration for your spreads for whichever month you're watching this in, really, because I know we got a little delayed in filming and editing and posting this one, so hope you got a bit of inspo for whatever your next bullet journal spread is going to be, and I hope you have a lovely day ahead.